Happy Monday, everybody. The Grunge Bible Podcast is back. My name is Ethan Shalloway, joined by Chris Salona, and we're happy you're here. We're happy you're here on this Monday to start your week off. It gives us energy. I know firing up your favorite podcast in the beginning of the week is always special.
It's a good feeling.
You always look forward to it. And Chris, I think there's some people out there that look forward to this podcast. So I'm happy to bring it to them today, even though, maybe it was a little bit difficult to find time to record. We still got it done, and we still love that.
Don't speak so soon.
Yeah, I guess we're in the middle of it, but we're still, I think that it means something to get it out there every week. So I'm happy we're doing this. I'm happy we're still doing this.
Yeah, I agree. It's an honorable pursuit, and we're happy to be on that pursuit as we bring you episode 96 of the Grunge Bible Podcast. I'm happy to be here. Ethan, how are you doing today? I have to say, before you answer that, I have to say my planning and preparation for this episode was just completely knocked off the rails. We're sitting down to record this on January the 18th, and right smack dab in the middle of the prep zone for this episode, Boy Genius, the super group of Phoebe Bridgers, Lucy Dacus, and Julian Baker just released their first 3 songs from the new album coming out on March 31st. So I decided to not prep for this episode and instead listen to the first 3 songs. But nevertheless, I mean, this is what life's about. Things happen and you still got to do things. But I'm excited. But that's definitely yeah.
I mean, sometimes rock stars go out on stage and they may not be in the best shape, and maybe they didn't practice, so they just showed up late, and they still
bring
deliver
a product to the people, though.
They still deliver an awesome show, and I like to think that we are also rock stars and are capable of anything. So we're still gonna do it. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'm happy for your honesty.
I mean, that's the thing. I can't betray the public trust.
No. I'm doing well, though.
Yeah, good.
It's midweek. We got past Monday and Tuesday, which are the harder days of the week for all the right reasons. So now we're hoping for a cruisy one coming up this weekend. Big football zone coming in.
Yeah.
Big Chiefs fan here, so they get the first round of their playoffs start after the bye. So pretty excited about that. It's the early game on Saturday, so I kind of like that. Yep. Kind of like getting that in and out of the way. And then hopefully I can be relaxed and watch the rest of them. I don't need to wait till, be like a Cowboys fan and wait till Monday night to see what happens. So
yeah, you bet.
And have the most rest too. I mean,
yeah, it's important to be well rested for important things.
It's true, and rest is hard to come by. I mean,
it is.
I was saying I've been doing pretty good with my nutrition lately and working out and stuff, but sleep though, on the other hand, I've fallen last week. I think I fell asleep on the couch 2 nights of the week.
Can't do that.
And then I fell asleep on the floor the other 2 nights.
That's even worse than the couch. I thought that the bleeding was going to stop at the couch for 2 nights, but the floor.
Sometimes I'll be laying there on the couch. It's just, it's a little too soft,
Yeah, you gotta get out of the...
And you can't sprawl out like you can on the ground. So I do some stretching, and then, you're just laying there. Then you put a little pillow underneath your head, and all of a sudden...
next thing you know, it's 3 a.m.
Exactly. 3 a.m. comes quick.
That's tough.
In a night of drinking or falling asleep on the couch, a night of waking up at 3 never always comes quick.
Yeah, you can't get that time back.
So this episode would not be possible without our patrons. So thank you to everybody who chooses to support us. Thank you for the listeners. We are. You guys really do your part and make this possible. So don't think that you're not appreciated, because you are, and we wouldn't 100%. Be able to do this without you.
Absolutely. So leading the pack, as usual, are our top-level supporters on Patreon at the $10 per month level. And at the time of this recording, that list reads as Christine Shepard, Black Hole Sean, Alexis Shannon, The Blue Owl, Alex Long, Captain Hightop, Doug Endy, Kara K, Brother Nature, Eddie Vedder got me through my second divorce, Jade Mercado, Fuck Soup, Fresh Tendonitis, Granny Grunge, Faith Bittner, Jamie Lynn, Carlene Salona, Chris LSMS, our number 1 fan from Australia, What the Fuck's Up Denny's, Shoe the Shoeless, Seattle 4 Fanboy from New Jersey, Lauren Irene, Marianne, Millie, Nikki Six, and Rachel Corning. So thank you to all of you for your support. And additionally, I want to pivot real quick over to the YouTube side of things because we got a good YouTube comment. This is a steadfast consumer of the podcast in its video form, always commenting. But the episode 2 weeks ago, episode 94 that we did on Lane Staley and the AIC self-titled, and their 96 video that came out. Luke Vining, I want to shout him out. He commented on that video saying he's about to get into the merch zone. So I appreciate him, one, making a decision to support, but secondly, communicating to us in the parlance of our times, in the proper nomenclature, getting into the merch zone. So we really appreciate that.
That's amazing.
We've got a lot of people that are in the support zone for this show, and it would not be possible to do this show without your support. And, with it being the fact that this episode's coming out on January the 23rd, there is one place that we would be remiss if we did not start this episode to mention, and that is 2 days from the time this episode comes out on January 25th. Jar of Flies, the ever famous EP from Alice in Chains, turns 29 years old. It was released on January 25th, 1994, and a long time ago, last January, we did a proper EP review of Jar of Flies, and that would be episode number 44, one of our more popular episodes that we've done. So if you want a in-depth look from our perspective at that EP, I would highly suggest going back to episode number 44 of the Grunge Bible podcast to get that down. But it's crazy, Ethan, you and I talk about all the time when we do the page, when we have this show. These anniversaries just pop up, obviously they happen once a year, but it feels like they happen so much more often than that. And it's just 29 years gone for this record, and certainly as a timeless listen. And it's one that's, I think it affects everybody depending on what your entry point in Alice in Chains is. I think this is one that kind of makes you pause and you spend some time with this one, maybe more so than you would with some of their other stuff, just because of how honestly it was recorded and how honest and vulnerable the subject matter is, and just how great the band is. Certainly, really, really one of the better bits of recording that I think we got from the entire record, and a cool side of Alice in Chains that I know at the time I mentioned was kind of a continuation of what they explored on the Sap EP from 92, but really, really momentous one, and important to commemorate it here as the anniversary is upon us once again.
Yeah, I think that, with it being, 30 minutes long, 7 songs, it definitely comes in a way that you can consume it regularly and listen to it, fully through, and that is, I think, why people really enjoy it too. It's the perfect length, and it takes you on a nice little journey. So, yeah, it's a really good one. I know we talked about that being one of our favorite albums of the time for a long period of time. Maybe it's moved away a little bit. I know we talked recently about some of Alice's other stuff, but. But yeah, this is a really, obviously a really solid album, and yeah, the anniversaries really do sneak up on you and come every year. They don't stop coming.
They really don't. And with this song, with this EP for me, looking back, obviously Nutshell I think was the first entry point for me. You hear Nutshell and then you want to hear it live, so you go and watch the Unplugged, and then you hear the Unplugged version of No Excuses and whatnot, and recently, I have to say, the song that I keep coming back to from this EP has got to be Rotten Apple.
Nice.
And it's kind of two-pronged. Number one, I never really gave Rotten Apple its due earlier on when I first started getting into Alice, when I first listened to Jar of Flies. So it's a bit more fresh to me than some of the other ones on the EP. So it's always cool to discover things that you don't have a lot of mileage with. But secondly, a big reason why I'm fully on the Rotten Apple train is for some ungodly reason, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months ago at this point, I decided to make a reel on the Instagram page. And it was the picture of Ben Affleck in a very exasperated state holding a cigarette. And I just played, I put the picture on, and it gave me 5 seconds of audio time. and I used the first 5 seconds of Rotten Apple, that, that nice intro that's there. And that one, it spoke to me at the time, and it's always shared by people. People keep finding it.
It spoke to other people too, Chris.
It spoke to a lot of other people, and as a matter of fact, I just posted it once again on January 17th, not too long before this episode comes out, because sometimes that's just how you feel. There's something about it. It just captures this energy, and for me, I take that song and I apply it as, when you're just like beat down and just generally over the circumstances that you may be in at the time. But that's
the Rotten Apple zone.
Yeah, I was firmly in the Rotten Apple zone. Today's a little bit better than when I felt the need to post it. But what about you, Ethan? I don't remember. I'm sure we spoke about it on episode 44, but what your favorite from Jar of Flies might be, or one that you one that you're particularly fond of right now. Is there one that stands out for you?
Yeah, they all are really have their place. I really love No Excuses, and I Stay Away.
It's such a small EP that you can kind of churn through them, so that's really, you don't psychologically feel like you need to pay attention to some more than the others, because it's all right there and you can get through them so quickly. That they all do have their place.
Yeah, I think, No Excuses is probably one of my favorite Alice in Chains songs. It just has such a drive to it and really it's just a beautiful song. Don't Follow is another really good one, but I really, I enjoy coming back and then, getting surprised by Swing on This at the end and Whale and Wasp, two songs that aren't the singles or whatever that you really think of.
That's a good take.
But those songs are so good in this 7, they're just mixed in so perfectly, good transition, and then a solid. And if Rotten Apple is the perfect beginner, then Whale and Swing on This is the perfect ending. And I think that it's just some really good musicianship on this album.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's cool that the band decided to, and I'm not sure if this is the right way to characterize it, but in a way, kind of take a risk of putting a song like Whale and Wasp on an EP. I mean, it's an EP. You don't have that much wiggle room on an EP because it's obviously not quite as long. But the fact, and it adds, a level of completeness to it, and it just kind of makes sense. And I'm interested. I would be interested to know what the perception would be of an Alice fan in '94 when this came out. Of what the hell? What's Whale and Wasp? You start listening to it, and is this the same band that a few years earlier put out Man in the Box, and Swing on This too? I mean, it's super swingy, obviously, and it's the vocal, everything's just
something
unique.
I would love to ask Jerry about Whale and Wasp, because it's an instrumental song. So, what is the title? What does the title mean, and why? Right. I mean, you could imagine whale is one of the bigger animals and the wasp is one of the smaller, so it has to do something with some symbolism, some just sizing up different areas of life and whatnot. But it would be kind of cool to hear them explain that, and maybe there is something out there that I need to look up. But I always thought that title is kind of unique. It's really unique.
No, it certainly is, and I just harken back to the origin story of the title of the Jar of Flies, with the science experiment that they alluded to back in the day, where you had an underfed jar of flies and they managed to survive, but the jar of flies that was overfed multiplied too much and all of them ended up dying. And Lane saying that Jerry saying that it affected Lane growing up.
Yeah, that is one of the better origins of an EP title name and the story behind it. So that is really good. I think everybody should go out there and take a listen again and maybe listen to one of the songs that maybe you skipped over for whatever reason, and see if you hear something,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just now realizing that I got my Alice in Chains members mixed up. It was Jerry who conducted that experiment in class when he was young, not Lane. So look at me. I'm producing myself on the fly.
On the fly, no corrections. We don't need Drew coming at the end and telling us that we messed something up now.
No, that's it. We do our own bidding. But absolutely. Jar of Flies. Something else with this record that I've noticed that is not really particular to the time period, or even maybe the band a little bit, but we're in the business of lowercase b business, the business of being on Instagram and making viral content that people engage with and we get impressions on, and people share them, and it grows our audience and our viewership base. For some reason, people fucking love the memes with Jar of Flies. And Alice in Chains as a whole. Like, I'll post Nirvana meme and I'll post an Alice in Chains meme, and people they flock to the AIC memes, and especially the Jar of Flies ones. I don't know why that is. Do you have any opinions? I guess for me, like,
yeah, it's a good observation. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is obviously anecdotal to us and our perspective, but it's just something. I think Jar of Flies is a record. It's an EP that people who like it really, really like the fact that they like it. And it's kind of like one of those things that it feels cool to be into Jar of Flies. Anybody could get into Dirt, and blast Rooster or whatever, blast Man in the Box driving down the highway. But, to kind of get into Jar of Flies, something like Whale and Wasp, you have to, you might be thinking a little differently, or, there's just something, there's something about that might be, people like to like this record, but also it's obviously a testament to, how cool this record is and how unique it is when you put it up against everything else that came throughout the era.
Yeah, speaking on the difference, I mean, like Nirvana, I'm trying to think of like how, Soundgarden, yeah, Alice in Chains sticks out, compared to the big four. Like they have, and I think every fan base is really diehard. Maybe Nirvana, I think it's because of the way that the lyrics are written and how people kind of digest it. And I feel like AIC has, they're all deep in their own way, but AIC has some really heavy undertones that go along with it that maybe the other bands didn't have all the time, or maybe not as apparent. And yeah, I guess memes kind of like pull on those psychological or like subconscious like thoughts that you didn't know you had, and then you watch Ben Affleck smoke a cigarette to the beginning of Rotten Apple, and you're like, holy shit, like this
all makes sense.
Yeah, it all makes sense. And then you start thinking of Rotten Apple and how like, fruits decay, and you're just like, oh, like, is that me? Like
innocence is over. Exactly.
Am I in too much shade? Like, do I like what is it?
Well, sometimes you do end up eating of the apple so young, and you have to crawl back to start.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's just the way that it goes. Yeah,
so I think it has to do with the content or just the people involved. I don't know. It's just a special place. I don't think it'll ever be overtaken by Nirvana either. It's just
and Alice fans, they just feel different to me. You go to a Jerry Cantrell show.
They're the real ones. I think they're the realest.
They're fucking cool. You go to a Jerry show, and just like the fanaticism that people have for his music. And I think for the younger generation, there's something about, for some reason, for me at least, Alice in Chains' music, maybe it's because, it could be through the tributary of Jerry's solo career and the fact that AIC still tours and you can see them, and they still release music, but it just feels more accessible to me than Nirvana, for example. If I were to pit the two against them personally, for me rather, but I don't know. Yeah, it just feels different, and people just seem to really, really have an appetite for their music, and in a way that I think is unique to them.
Yeah, well said. Like I said, these fans are the realest. And I think they'll always hold that spot. So good for them.
It's like the underfed flies in the jar. They can persist and they'll survive. And, if you're overfed, sometimes, it's not a good sign.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Good. Yeah. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that episode that we did on Jar of Flies and see what my thoughts were then versus what my thoughts were now. I haven't admittedly I haven't listened to the EP in a little bit. I've been heavy into the self-titled and also Sap a little bit too. But it's always one to crawl back to for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that wraps it up for the Jar of Flies. It's coming out their anniversary in 2 days. Unless you have anything else to say about it.
No, I don't. I think it's time. We owe a certain service to the people that listen to this show, to the people that are connoisseurs of the Grunge Bible podcast, to the people that will send us their thoughts on episodes or share something with us that we may not have known or something that we may have missed during the show, or encourage us to go deeper into some certain areas. And we've had one of those recently where we spoke about something we didn't really know about the thing that we were speaking about, and we were certainly encouraged both by one another, but also by the people that listened to take a certain dive into a certain band. And last week on the podcast, we were talking about the festival lineups in 1992, and one band that kept showing up on the festival bills was the mighty Buffalo Tom. And we made a promise on air at the time that we were going to get into Buffalo Tom. And after the fact, we did get some messages encouraging us to check out Buffalo Tom. And we sit here today changed men because we have... We were bearers of witness to the grace and the power that is Buffalo Tom, and I need to get your thoughts, Ethan, because you certainly, I think you went deeper into the Buffalo Tom area than I did, and I just want to hear what your thoughts are on this band and where they fit and what value they have for you, because I was certainly affected, and I know you were too, and this is the cool thing. I mean, music from 35 years ago can still speak to you now here in 2023. This is what it's all about. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
The floor is mine. Okay. So I'm going to do something here and see where it goes. So bear with me. And, factually and exactly like how big they were back in the day, I'm not sure on everything and how they were perceived by the scene. But me taking a look into some of their songs, some of their music, and seeing where they fit in. And I watched a little bit of the KEXP that they did in 2018 when their most recent album came out. It was called Quiet and Peace. And, the KEXP does a great job, and they kind of talked to them, and they kind of like got into a few things, and it was just a great interview. And so Buffalo Tom, all right. These guys are... How do I say? I don't want to say the American dream. Like, these guys are playing music. They're trying to make it work. They get to a certain level of stardom, but they don't break into, say, the Pearl Jams and the Nirvanas that will be, brought up at the table 25 years later and people will know about them. They maybe get lost throughout the years, but there's a special place for bands like that. There's a special place for bands that had their run, killed it, enjoyed it, made their impact on the scene, and then had their lives. In the interview, they said after the first, their first album, they had kids and they kind of focused less on the music. And he actually said, not to be offensive to the grunge scene, but we kind of, we got lumped into them, but we kind of moved away and made these records, and it felt more right. And they were just doing life and having music on the side. And I think that's a dream for a lot of people, to be able to to be successful, but not be too pressured to get certain things, certain accolades or whatnot. I'm sure they had dreams to be massive and whatnot, but they put together a really beautiful discography that I'm just getting into. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But what they have this sound that just takes you back to the way bands used to be, and bands are not the same anymore in the way that they played. And they talk about the music scene in Boston because they're from Boston, right? And they would have people come in and they were talking about how competitive it was back then and how music was the music scene was so fun. You could pick any club to go to and you'd have 4 great bands that are all like really, not that the openers aren't good now, but it was just different back then. And they have this song called Summer's Gone, or it's called Summer, and they talk about it. And summer is such a nostalgic time. Yeah. And the lyrics are just great. They talk about they bring up a grandma's town, and you think everybody knows where the grandma's house and where you go for lunch or something. And it just had this. It just gave me a great wave of nostalgia while listening to them. And I was like, hold on, this band is a different type of nostalgia than Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam takes you back and they make you, but this band is it's kind of the background of 20 years ago for everybody, even us as older or young 20s and mid 20s.
kind of like the stuff that you would hear during the in-betweens, you know,
the
like
in-betweens,
you're at the
exactly.
store, you're driving to work and things
exactly.
like that.
The one they had a hit one summer that played that you remember specifically in 90 when, you know, that first album came out, and I just love that the way they phrased it. They were just like, you know, we made the music and we didn't really worry about it, and just like we're really proud of it, and the way they kind of talk about it. But yeah, it's the in-between music. And I think about that a lot. Like if I get into a band right now, because you know not everybody's built to be famous and built to have all that. If I were to get into a band, like I'd want to be successful, but I don't think I'd want to get to the point where, you know, you just had to play. I don't know. The massive shows would be fun, but you hear all the time how draining it was. And I think that there's a sustainability with these. I don't want to call them like a middle band, but like maybe they're in the sweet spot. Maybe we're missing something, and these guys are onto it. And I feel like they had an 8-9 album career, and like it just, you know, Buffalo Tom. Their name is so simple. They took, you know, as a Buffalo Springfield and the name of their drummer, Tom McGinnis, and they just combined the two. Like, it's simple stuff, and they just talked about the good old days. And one of the lyrics from in their the 2018 album is like, the time behind is greater than the time ahead. And you know, then they made sure to say, not that the time ahead isn't good, just like, you know, just like a ranking, it's just always going to be, it's always a little bit higher. And it's just had all these nostalgic, like small lyrics. It was very simple, like lyrics to that one song. They just kind of threw in like, you know, summer's gone, a summer song, you've wasted every day. And that's how summer feels. You go through summer, you know, the video that they posted was like all like surfing. It had some baseball clips in there, and it was like, you know, all of our heroes like Mick and Keith and Willie Mays, and like, you know, baseball and baseball and concerts. That's something you do in the summer, and like, and all of a sudden, like he says like the leaves burn and summer's done. Like when fall comes in, like fall is here, and it's just like, you know, that's just the most nostalgic time. And I just like, I think there's a sweet spot here that I didn't really, you know, realize. You know, the big four and the famous bands are nostalgic, but then you find these other bands that, you know, for us, it's going to be, you know, maybe say Petey doesn't, you know, make it to that type of stardom, and you know, it doesn't matter because 25 down the years,
everybody's got a part to play, and it stinks too because, and we're definitely probably less so now, but definitely when we first began, we are in a level complicit in the, they were a band in 1991, so it's grunge, you know. Buffalo, they didn't none of these bands that are what we call on the periphery. None of them set out to be like, I want to be part of Seattle and make all of this grunge music. You know, it wasn't like that. They were just guys or people who got together, who had an honest relationship with the music they were playing, and they play a part in the scene. And I think Buffalo Tom, after listening to them, it really just, you know, each band that I discover, you know, in air quotes, you know, it further reinforces the fact that there was really something for everybody out there, and there at the time, and there were all different types of music from all different types of bands and all different types of geographic regions. And, you know, growing up 45 minutes from Boston, it's cool to learn about these bands that came from Massachusetts and set up, and there was a music scene there. I mean, Buffalo Tom, Jay Mascis, Dinosaur Jr., the relationship that they all had. It's really cool to think of the fact that, you know, there were bands like this coming from the region that I grew up in, and it's kind of like you said, you know, they had kids, they had families afterwards, and, you know, regardless of where life or the charts take you, you still have an honest relationship with the music that you make and the music that you create, and that's something that's really cool. And you know, because you can't control where you lay on the charts, you can't control
exactly, and that
what musical explosion is happening across the country at the same time. There's things you can't control, and there's value in learning about the bands that were what we call on the periphery, so called. There's value in learning about these scenes and these bands who weren't you know, headlining festivals or playing MTV Unplugged or you know, having 3 number 1 singles in 3 years.
And like
there's
you said,
value in that. It illuminates everything.
And where you land does not discredit the art that you create and the time that you put in. And and like they said, their first album came out in Bird Brain, or I think they had one in 90, but Bird Brain was their like first big one. It got lumped into the grunge scene, and that's kind of why they got that maybe tag with them. But they, you know, they just played music that meant a lot to them. And I feel like I'm not saying that bands don't do that now, but maybe it's social media, maybe it's whatever, to like, you want something to explode, you want to be big. Like maybe back then that people weren't worried about that stuff, and they were really actually worried about, writing the music. And that's why you have a little bit deeper of a scene back then.
Well, and something that's changed now is we're in our 20s now in modern times, and we grew up with the understanding and not only the understanding but the expectation that there were eyes on us all the time. There were cameras taking pictures and videotapes rolling at all times,
and it would come back at some point.
And everything is documented. And back then it's like, hey, like we're gonna go into this studio, we're gonna play, and we're not gonna. People aren't gonna be tagging us in Instagram posts after we get off, playing a set, at the local rock club or whatever. We're gonna put it out, and people don't listen to the radio or go to the record store. They're probably not gonna hear about us. And it's just a different scene. And it's interesting too because Jay Mascis worked with them. I believe he produced a couple of their earlier records, and at the time, obviously, Dinosaur Jr. were a bigger band, and they were kind of bagged on, Buffalo Tom were, of being Dinosaur Jr. Jr., which it makes it. I struggle to think about the fact that we should penalize people for being friends, with other people who are in more popular bands, or penalize people for, creating similar music as their more popular friends, because they all came from the same ecosystem and they all had the same influences. But everybody. It's like putting together a puzzle. You have some bands that gave you, 30 pieces of the puzzle, and other bands that gave you maybe 7 or 8 pieces of the puzzle, but you need them all to see the full picture. And bands like Buffalo Tom, and one a few years ago that I got into that I know I've spoken about, School of Fish, same thing, coming from Boston, 2 albums, that's it. But it creates a more full understanding. And I think that's really important for people who didn't grow up in the scene, because Buffalo Tom's one of those bands that if we post them and we talk about them on the show, we have a lot of people that be like, yeah, this is well done. This is a good choice to put on here. I love it when people say that, like this was a good choice to share this band. It's more important for people our age who weren't there to learn about these bands, because it becomes a bigger and better picture of what was going on.
And if you don't necessarily want to give Buffalo Tom maybe the time of day for whatever reason, just remember that these guys played for our heroes. They opened for our heroes. They were friends with our heroes. You know what I mean? They played with Pearl Jam and Soundgarden.
Yeah, they were Reading 92.
Yeah, like Eddie Vedder knows their names. You know what I mean? Like these guys, you could ask Buffalo Tom back in the I'm sure they have stories about these guys like anybody. But then you also hear them in interviews, and they have you guys, when they were playing that show, it was like, you got away from the family. It's like, we had to leave the kids. They know they're teenagers. They don't even care, or this, and they have normal lives and stuff. And I love that. I feel like, because they also have those memories and time, like I said, with our heroes, which is just mind blowing in a way.
Yeah, and there's a lot of bands like this and musicians like this. I mean, it's like Buffalo Tom, School of Fish. For some people, Jay Mascis' solo stuff. I mean, I think of the Lemonheads maybe, or Bob Mould. I mean, definitely. There's a lot of these bands that you wouldn't think about, that are kind of on the periphery of where all the attention goes, but it's important.
And Buffalo Tom, Mr. Tom, said that one of their favorite shows was billed with the Lemonheads and 2 other bands like Mars Volta or something, and they were like, it was one of the best ever. We were playing with great bands all the time, great people. And it comes back to the conversation we had with Tim Sonnefeld, where in Town Hall they toured for 3 years straight,
relentlessly,
and they were big, they were successful, and they will always have that. They have that time together where they lived in a van and they toured, and that is incredibly special to them. And I find solace in that. I find solace in knowing that these bands
I take comfort in that.
I take comfort in that, because they had it. And those time, like that, the time behind is greater than the time ahead. They have that, but now they have their own time now, and they don't need to. They don't need to live in the past. You get to look back, but you're not you're not still, say, playing alive type stuff.
Yeah, but it's weird. There's a middle ground that more people inhabit than others give them credit for, of being proud of the fact that you had a great accomplishments in your past, and being, you can be proud of that. But a lot of people see someone who's proud of what they've done, and they're like, oh, you gotta get your mind out of the past and stop living in the past. But I mean, it's important. I mean, you should be proud of these things, and you should consume them and appreciate them, and give the art from the past the time of day. Got to do it.
And not everybody can be Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam or Alice.
Right, there's only so much space at the top.
Yeah, you can't exactly. You can't all be the number one album of the year, you know. Yeah, but you can. But for everybody, it is. You know, people have their favorite album. People have their favorite bands, and that's why, you know, you hear, you know, interviews. The interviewer was John Richards, and he was like that. You know, that album, Let Me Come Over, he said, I played it till it was dead in my tape cassette as I was, that summer. And, the same stories that we have. It's like, it was the only thing, it was the only one in my car, but it was the best one. And, oh man. So
that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. And that's exactly what Buffalo Tom is for me. I'm excited to get more into some of their songs and kind of get into it. But I'm a big fan of Dino Jr. and Jay Mascis. So it's no surprise that I enjoy this type of, kind of rock, this like alternative indie rock from the 90s. It's it's just a good band, It's
just good music,
It's just people playing together.
100%. And I think it has been a while since the Brain Trust here at Grunge Bible University have handed out homework to all of our students, but I think Buffalo Tom is on the docket. We want you all to go out and listen, pick an album or pick their top songs, or just hop around and see what your thoughts are, and let us know, because there comes a point in time. I mean, the people who were teenagers in the 80s and 90s, they're getting older, and we have the means more than any other generation, speaking to people who are our age or younger, to go out there and discover music from the past, and discover art, any type of art from the past. And it's important to get maybe off the main roads a little bit and see what you think. And I realize it's also funny, we're talking about them being off the main roads, and they were on the bills at some of like the biggest festivals in the 90s, but that's the weird thing that time does. For us, they're obscure, and for other people, they were the focal point of a summer or multiple summers. But that's the thing, it's all relative to your perspective, and I think it's cool anytime you can increase your own perspective. So that's, at the end of the day, what we're asking everybody to do, and what we like to do, is to increase that perspective that you view music from, and that you view eras of music from. And Buffalo Tom's a part of that for this sake.
Yeah, we talk about how we've listened to a lot of music, but there's so much music out there, and I feel like I caught myself the other day. I've listened to Billy Strings a little bit, and I've sent them to you, and there's a song that came on that I've never heard before, and I was like, it did so much for me, and I was like, how have I not heard this before? And it takes me back to that John Mayer quote, like,
good music's not mad that it took you a long time to discover it. It just says, we're happy you're here, and we have a lot to catch up on.
Yeah. Exactly, and like,
that's what it's about.
There's music back then was even like the 50s. I just think like there's like the Just Do It Digital or whatever, when they post this old stuff, and there's just good music. There's been good music going on for so long, the musicians and the creativity. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. So that's the rant for today, is about Buffalo Tom.
Yeah, that was a good rant. I feel like it's been a little bit since we've had that one, and it's not so much. Hopefully, it's not preaching to the choir or getting on the soapbox. But I mean, this stuff's important, and I'm happy that we had that moment with Buffalo Tom, and I hope everybody finds their Buffalo Tom, and maybe it might be Buffalo Tom. I'm saying Buffalo Tom a lot.
Hell yeah,
that's great. If you're still with us at this point, and you have hereby been enlightened as the power of Buffalo Tom, we thank you for listening. We're really appreciative of that fact, and any way that you'd like to support us, the Patreon, you could get into the merch zone. You could join Luke Vining there in the merch zone. Join our top level Patreon supporters at the $10 a month zone, or just get in the comment zone, the follow zone, or the subscription zone. All of these are very, very good zones to be in.
It is.
Yeah, we'd also like to thank our producer, Drew McFadden, for all of his work on this podcast as we approach the 2-year anniversary. I can't wait for all of the exciting things that we're going to do to commemorate year 2. I don't know if we're going to do anything.
You just never know. Episode 100, episode 104, all the anniversaries are coming out, and then we can
that we can rest until 500.
We could be done, right?
Yeah, we could be done. Jesus, we need to be done. No, that's okay. We need to be done with this episode. Let's get to songs of the week.
Yeah, songs of the week. No surprise, mine is gonna come from Buffalo Tom, and it is 100% gonna be "Summer" off of their 1995 album "Sleepy Eyed." Very nostalgic. So the music video is great. It's kind of like cut together clips. The guys just hanging out, some baseball, some surfing, and it does exactly what it's meant to do, and that's supposed to take you back to a place that you're really fond of, with the buddies that you spend a lot of time with in your formative years, which we like talking about a lot. I mean, it's just unescapable, but it is really fun to be there. So don't be afraid. Go watch the video if you'd like, and just listen to the song and be happy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no surprises for mine as well. It's also coming from Buffalo Tom, although it is not a Buffalo Tom original. The song that I'm choosing is from their most recent and possibly final studio album, 2018's Quiet and Peace. And I am selecting their cover of The Only Living Boy in New York, originally by Simon and Garfunkel. And exactly what you were saying, this one kind of hit me at a point. The Only Living Boy in New York, the Simon & Garfunkel version, the original, was one that I heavily associate with the end of my time in college. I discovered it around that time, and I was listening to it a lot. I remember, driving to my internship and listening to it and kind of thinking about what the future was going to be like, and what the next few months had in store for me and where I was going to go, and one of those points where you feel the gravity of the decisions you're about to make before you make them, and last week after we recorded episode 95, as soon as we got off, I shuffled Buffalo Tom, and that was one of the first songs that played, and it put that song in a new light, and it made me appreciate that song, but also appreciate Simon and Garfunkel, or appreciate Buffalo Tom rather. They could take a song that I loved and present it in another way to me that I appreciate just as much. So that's what good musicians do, and they create moments, sometimes even with songs that you already had moments with. So that's my song of the week. So we've got a double shot of Buffalo Tom for these songs of the week this week. I'm glad that we got these off of our chest. I know we've this discussion has been percolating for the last 7 days. Yeah. So it's finally here.
That's all I've thought about.
Yeah, with that, I think it's time that we release everybody into the great wide open, and we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to chatting with you next week.
Yep, the dude abides.
Take it easy out there.
Take it easy out there, and come back next week.
Yeah, we'd love to see you back.
We'll be
All right,
here.
everybody, take care.
See you guys.